I had purchased what I had thought was a rather expensive paddleboard, the iRocker 11-foot all-around paddleboard. While browsing Amazon, I found a number of cheap paddleboards. So naturally I thought, what's the difference between a cheap paddleboard and a more expensive one? And more importantly, would I actually notice a difference? Did I waste a lot of money on my board? So I started looking around August 2021 and I found this. At the time I spent around $240. The specs really didn't matter so much. Around a 10 or 11 foot board was what I was looking for, and this one happens to be a 10-foot board and a little narrower at 30 inches versus my original 11-foot board was 32 inches wide. Sometimes when you go cheap, you get what you pay for, and sometimes you get lucky. I'll break this review down looking at the board, paddle, and pump. First, opening the package and seeing what was there, I immediately noticed how light the board was. In fact, they say it's around 17 pounds. My iRocker is around 26 pounds. The bag is noticeably smaller than my other board, and the pump has 2 stages instead of 3 in my iRocker. The paddle is aluminum and can be broken down into 3 pieces. There's a single large fin that is detachable, and 2 rather small fins that are permanently stuck on the board. They're comically small, and I wondered if they actually have any function. So pumping up the board with the 2-stage pump, I was impressed at how quickly and efficiently it worked. The first stage of the pump inflates on both the downstroke and the upstroke. You'll use this until it becomes too difficult to do so. When you remove the plug, now you're inflating on just the downstroke, and this allows you to get higher pressures. The maximum pressure on this board is 15 psi, so I decided to inflate it around 13 psi. As you can see, it just took me over 7 minutes to reach that 13 psi. Definitely quicker than my iRocker inflation. Inserting the fin is pretty easy. You just slide it in and put the locking tab in place. No screws. You just have to make sure you don't lose that locking tab. So on first impression, there are some imperfections in the finish. Everything looks good with the seams, and only time will tell how durable it is. And you'll see in some clips, I'm not gentle on my boards, and I do take them in really strange places that are prone to trees and rocks. The handle's adequate, but it seems a little misplaced. If it was set back to the rear a bit more, when you picked up the paddleboard, it wouldn't tend to dip backwards. A little annoying to carry. Now standing on it, it feels a little bit softer, not quite as rigid as the iRocker. Now I hate to do this because the price differential is so big, but let's look at the difference between the two. The EVA foam pad on the top is definitely a little thicker on the iRocker. There's the lack of carrying handles on the front and back, which does make it easier to maneuver the board around, especially when you're boarding it. There aren't that many D-rings on the MaxCare paddleboard, and I use them quite a bit when I'm fishing to set my anchor and to hold down some gear. And one obvious thing is there's no rear elastic cords. Of course I knew this when I purchased, so no surprise there. You can purchase some D-rings that you can glue onto your board, and I plan to do that in the near future. So blah blah blah. Now the most important part, what is it like on the water? Now I did laugh at one person's review, well the only review, that said it was unstable on the water. I thought it was someone who had never been on a paddleboard and they didn't know what to expect. However, the first time I got on that paddleboard, that's exactly what I thought. Man, I thought this thing is so hard to balance on. I was thinking the contributing factors, of course, are the 2-inch difference in width compared to my other board. I really didn't know 2 inches would make such a big difference. And the other factor may be the weight of the boards. With the MaxCare coming in at only 17 pounds, this may reduce some stability on the board, but again, I'm not certain of that. All this being said, it tracks well in the water. The one large fin does a good job. It's easy to steer and negotiate through some tight spots, and I'll show you that coming up. The more time I spend on it, the more comfortable I became, and like anything new, you just have to get used to it and understand this board's personality. So first impression on this board, and I laughed at somebody else's review. There's only one review and it said it felt so unstable. If this was my very first paddleboard, I would feel so insecure on this thing. You know, I started on the iRocker 11-foot paddleboard, and this is night and day in terms of stability. Track's really straight, very smooth. It's very quick, actually. Probably because it's narrower than the board that I have. For example, when I'm doing like turning maneuvers, my feet are going like crazy, just, you know, trying to keep that balance. And as you can see, I have my fishing gear here. Standing up to fish and cast on my iRocker, no problem. Super stable. Here, I can stand up and cast and fish on it, but honestly, I'm much more comfortable sitting down to fish on this thing in terms of confidence. It may take a little while to get used to this thing, and I think I will get used to it, but my first impression of it is, I don't know, kind of scary, to be quite honest. But the water is super flat right now. There's almost no wind, and I can't even imagine with more current and wind how this would feel. As a first paddleboard for somebody, I think, because I'm looking at it, the price point, you know, if somebody's buying this, either, you know, they don't have a whole bunch of money, or, you know, they're tentative and they don't want to spend $1,000 or, you know, $500 on a paddleboard. They're not quite sure if they're going to like it, and I could see them putting up the money for this. But I don't know if you're buying this, you're going to be like, oh yeah, and then you end up loving the paddling, because honestly, it's a little hard to use at first. You don't feel quite stable, but for what it is, it works, and it gets you out on the water. And I think that's probably one of the most important things, is it gets people out on the water and have some fun. Would I buy it again to get out on the water, do a little bit of fishing and all that kind of stuff? Sure, I would do it. It's just too many weeds to navigate. Just do our best. Now, this is the second time I'm on this paddleboard and getting used to how it feels. So going on this for my second time now, you do get used to the balance of it. And I was thinking about this a little bit more. Why was it so difficult for me to balance on this thing compared to my 2-inch wider iRocker? And I think it comes down to, number one, the weight of the board. The iRocker is probably, I think, almost 7 to 8 pounds heavier than this one. So there is some stability to the weight, also the width of the board. So that will definitely make a big difference. Going on this board for a little bit longer, for a beginner, I would say stick with that 32-inch. That gives you a little bit more stability. Somebody as a beginner will be more comfortable. So if you're a smaller person, maybe not as strong, and you want to carry your board around, perfect. Oh, an owl. Oh, awesome. Wow, it just landed right there. Backpacking, good for people who live in an apartment, good for people who want a lighter board. Absolutely, this is like night and day compared to the iRocker. But there are some 32-inch boards that are about $80 more, $80 or $100 more, which I think I would go for that, is the 32-inch board, which is a little bit more stable. At least for me, because I'm about 6 feet tall, and when I stand out on it, my center of gravity is much higher. So if you're shorter, this might do just fine and you won't notice a difference. Time will only tell with how durable it is, and I'm going to be going over some rough areas, probably some hitting a few things like some rocks and some branches, and we'll see how durable it is. But again, for the price, getting out on some open water, this is a fantastic deal. Let's see if I can go through this part here, just move a few branches. Oh yeah, there we go. Holy smokes. That's not even bending or moving at all. Well, scrape, scrape, scrape on this tree. Oh yeah, I get to see the durability of this thing. wow. Look at this. Gross, 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 gross. Look at that. Ho ho. That's what you have to negotiate when you're riverboarding here. That was fun. Now time to negotiate the rest of this river. Oh, one other thing about this paddle is, I think I mentioned this, that how this, you know, twists and turns and doesn't really actually lock in. The other thing is, it goes to a maximum of about 82 inches, and it says stop, right? So I'm about 6 feet tall. I got a fairly long torso, so I like to have it pretty much close to the maximum or close to it. And yeah, so if you're any taller, you're going to be limited by how long the paddle can go. It's made out of aluminum, this paddle. It better float. Yeah, so it floats. It's a little bit heavier than my paddle, my carbon fiber paddle, but decent. I just don't like the fact that this doesn't really lock in, and it doesn't go any longer than this, but the length is not the huge issue. It's just the rotation of this that really bugs me. It doesn't feel as stable. River obstacle number 2. Plan is to bring the paddleboard underneath, and I just hop over and get on it. Let's see how this goes. There we go. Bring it through. Step over. Oh gosh. Is that a good idea? Oh, that was a good idea. Huh. I don't know if everybody would like to do that. That was fun. That was the obstacle. Got it. I just got to get rid of that. Okay, next major obstacle, shallow water. So, anyway, let's see how this portages basically. Should be a piece of cake. Would I recommend this? Yeah, I think I would recommend this. Overall, it's a good paddleboard once you get used to the balance point, and I can fish and cast off of this standing up. My number one thing is get out there, no matter what paddleboard you're on. Again, this is the cheapest one, but there's plenty of them out there. Get out there and enjoy this beautiful nature. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next Ladybug adventure. Oh, what do you know? Black crappies. Sweet. Off the new Max Care paddleboard. Pretty nice fish.